Hi, everyone, and happy Monday. Thanks for joining us for another exciting AdvisorShares AlphaNooner. Today, we're very excited to welcome for the first time Jerry Haymon on to spend some time hearing his story on the war on drugs and how it has personally affected him, and then where we are going from here as the landscape is potentially shifting away from prohibition to normalization. So if you're out there and joining, one, really appreciate it as always. Two, if you have any questions, comments, you're always welcome to throw them in the chat, and we'll get to them as we go along. But with all that said, Jerry, thanks so much for joining. Really appreciate it. How is your morning starting out so far?
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Mackenzie. My mornings are going great. As you can see behind me, I'm in sunny California, so I'm having a great morning. How's yours?
That's awesome. It's good. I know from just, seeing some of the interviews you've done in the past, you always have, I think, a very sunny disposition, which is great. Appreciate sort of
Yeah.
bringing the positivity as we're starting the week. I was telling you it's a little bit cold over here, but that's okay. Nothing to complain about, I think, ultimately. But so I feel like since it's your first time on and you have such an interesting story to share, I would love to start kind of working through your background, kind of where you were before cannabis, how you came to cannabis, and kind of where things are now.
Yeah. I'm from Fresno, California. I grew up in Fresno, California, and I went to high school in Clovis, California. I was a star athlete in football, and I earned a full-ride scholarship to Eastern Michigan College to play football. And I graduated high school in 2011. Um, And when I went to college, just a normal average college kid from a grade two parent household. So I had great family structure. And I went to college and, just like any other freshman, I had all the freshman college fun. And then I decided ultimately, about after a year and a half, that I wanted to transfer and play football at a different college. So then I transferred back to California because I was homesick, and I went to junior college and played football there, and then ultimately earning another full ride scholarship to Sacramento State.
Wow, very nice.
So
I think, yeah.
yeah, thank you. So during that little transitional time, I was hearing about a group of guys called the Jungle Boys, and I was hearing about the cannabis industry being the new gold rush for entrepreneurs in California. So I didn't know anything about cannabis. I didn't smoke cannabis. I didn't know anything about it at all. But I was a business major, and I understand that I'm a finance guy, so I wanted to be involved in there. I'm a capitalist, so I started to learn as much as I could as quickly as I could. And I soon to learn that cannabis is very lucrative, and I was a very, very low barrier to entry to becoming very successful. So then I then started to source out um, growers throughout California and just learn as much as I can about the industry. And then ultimately, I started to find customers throughout California and from other states. And I went and got a state license. I went and got my state card to grow and to possess cannabis in the state of California. I then went and saw counsel from a few attorneys at the time and just asked questions, just how do I make sure that I do this legally? So, unbeknownst to me, that even though I was on California soil, and even though that I never left the state or never went to any of the states that I was found guilty of doing business with, I thought that everything was good, I was safe, and this is kind of the advice that the lawyers gave me: don't leave California soil, and you're safe. So at the time, I'm in college and I'm playing football, as you can imagine how hectic a college athlete's day is and schedule is. So I'm waking up, 5:30, 6 a.m. in the morning, going to football workouts, then going to practice, then going to study, then going to class, then coming back to football. And I wasn't the average 18 or 19-year-old kid going to college, because once I got done with school, I then was getting phone calls for 150 to $200,000 deals that I had to go facilitate and do a transaction. And these type of deals were happening weekly to bi-weekly. So um, from 2012 to 2017, I kind of were doing about, on the low end, maybe 50 grand, to high end, $350,000 monthly in revenue with my cannabis sales. So, if you can imagine, I'm in economics class and I'm sitting there and I'm learning about micro and macro economics and GDP. And then I'm, having study groups with classmates who are talking about how they can't make a rent, or how they can't afford groceries, and I'm just sitting there quiet because in the back of my mind I'm trying to facilitate how to make $1 million in the next 60 days. So it was a very, very, very adventurous time for me, and I think that I've learned so much. So fast forward from college days. Um, so now business has been going well for myself, and I'm about 25 years old now. So maybe 5 years have has passed at a time from maybe 19 or 20 to I'm 24, 25. I then get wind that I'm a target of an investigation. So I went and got my lawyer. I went and spoke to my lawyer and seek counsel. And at the time, my lawyer said, I received a target letter, and my lawyer was saying, you're just a target of an investigation, but there's no charges brought against you. So quickly, at the time, I didn't know where the target came from because I did have clients coming from other places purchasing cannabis from me. So I thought that it was just to scare me at the time. And about a year went by, and my lawyer called me and said, "Hey, they're going to issue an indictment on you. Just like give me a heads up." Boom, an indictment comes down, and the indictment says that I was charged with conspiracy to distribute 1,000 or more kilograms of marijuana. And I quickly didn't understand it at the time, and I went and sat on my lawyer, and he explained to me that there's a charge called conspiracy. And this is a charge that is sentencing a lot of people to a lot of time in our country. And we really need some legislation change on this thing. And what conspiracy is where you, me, and another person agrees upon something or talks about something. I am liable for the actions of that person.
Mm.
So although I did never went to those states or I never mailed or shipped anything, which the government tried to prove that I shipped anything, I had knowledge that the people who were purchasing product from me weren't from California.
Mhm.
And that was enough for me to get sentenced to 10 years for a nonviolent cannabis crime. So, yeah, so that's how we get here today.
That's quite a story. I feel like interesting to see. I mean, obviously, you have a lot of drive, a lot of energy ultimately to be juggling class, college,
Uh,
sports life, which is very difficult, and this really big entrepreneurial stake, which does have a good amount of risk, but it seemed like you were kind of walking through it in the best approach. You weren't trying to, do it in a haphazard way and really trying to follow the rules in the process, which is incredibly tough, I think, to see again the result that you had to go through and I guess are ultimately still going through. I know you obviously are not in jail now, but I know there are still restrictions on your life that, to this day still affect kind of how you have to operate and live. Out of curiosity, when you were sort of getting into cannabis for the first time from like a business perspective and all of that, obviously you're consulting with lawyers to try to make sure you're running by the law and all
right.
those things as well. Were you talking with other people that were also kind of trying to develop? Because I know, if you're working in construction or if you're working in finance, you normally tend to attract friends that are maybe working in the same areas and can kind of help
Mhm.
each other, refine their process. What was that like?
Oh, well, for me, I would say yes and no. Yes, because I would only really speak to those who I was conducting business with, and no, because I was a college kid, so I
Sure.
didn't want to give any, I don't want to bring any attention to me that I was making this type of money because at the
Yeah.
time, I was playing college football and I was making more than the coaches that were coaching me. So I wasn't really like a flashy guy or the guy that would give off that I was making that much money per month. So it's hard to really come out and say, hey, how do I grow my business from, 50 to 100 grand a month to $1 million a month? It's kind of hard. And it was such a gray area at the time where no one really knew. No one really knew what to do, how to do it. Even to today, even to today, even though we're so far in advance from where we were 10, 12 years ago, but it's still it's still a rocky area because people are still getting arrested today for cannabis and non-violent cannabis crimes, and people don't understand why or how, and it still happens today.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's no hard and fast playbook then and now
Right.
as well. I think that that's true. Yeah, also kind of interesting to look back just in the current moment of where we are now. You're right. There are so many more states in the US that now allow for recreational use or medical use in their specific state, but we do still have this overhang of it being federally legal, scheduled to the highest schedule that you can have, really, really highly controlled and, high charges, I guess, ultimately for, involvement in cannabis, which is sort of this weird system that you firsthand know doesn't really work and has some extreme consequences in terms of upending people's lives. So okay, so you said you had gone in out of curiosity when you were kind of in prison. Were you talking with people who also kind of because if you're in California, you might have also run into people who had kind of gone through the same things, had gotten caught up in cannabis in one way or another. What was that sort of like?
Oh, in prison, you
Mhm.
I mean, there's nowhere I ever been in prison where no one knows me. I speak to every single person on the yard because I want to pick everyone's brain. I want to know what, what they're in it for. I want to know what they're doing, what they're thinking about doing, and what they used to do. So I did meet guys who had cannabis charges. Their charges were a little different than mine just because they had other elements to their cases. But I did, yeah. I spoke, and when I tell you, in 2020, when I was sentenced, there wasn't anyone on the yard that I went to that believed that I was really in there for cannabis because it's such a conceptual thing that it's legal. Everyone smokes. Everyone has marijuana. Marijuana sold everywhere. So I really was a unicorn on the yard when it comes to my case, right? And my background. I've never been in trouble. Never got a speeding ticket. And people just thinking to themselves as, "Wow, why is this guy here? And he's in here for marijuana?" Because I was really the one person on the entire yard who was purely just only there for a non-violent cannabis charge.
That is
Yeah,
crazy. Yeah, that is really, I mean, again, I think you seem to be very positive and optimistic and willing to kind of
always.
push through stuff, which is great. And I think that really, rewards you over time. But that has to be incredibly hard to see other people kind of in prison for much tougher things versus, again,
Mhm.
something that is so relatively harmless, that you were again trying to follow the rule of the law. So I guess maybe taking it to where things are now, how has your kind of experience shaped your views on cannabis policy, justice, all those things in sort of 2026, different from 2012?
I think that it just gives me more optimism. I think if I'm the type of person that I don't dwell on things that go negative because I just know that they don't last forever. Everything's just temporary. So I think that I always took the mindset that this is just my hurdle in life to get over, and I'm going to get over it. Whether it's climbing way to the sky to get over or digging a tunnel and going under it. But I'm going to get through it. And I think that my mindset now with the political standpoint is that I'm just willing to work with anyone who is on the who are against it. So anyone that's against the cannabis industry, any politician that thinks it shouldn't be legalized, or the safe banking shouldn't pass, or banking should be given to these companies that truly deserve and truly need it, I would tell them, and I'm urging them, and I'm calling on them to meet me, and let's sit down at the table and let's have a discussion. And let me give my perspective and my opinion on why I think it should pass and why I think that the industry needs it and ultimately the American people need it. So I think that dialogues like what you and I are having with people from two different walks of life and people that were in the industry on the illicit market or in the legal market or people who are against the market at all, I think the only way that we come to, sort of a conclusion on a solution is that we sit down and talk to each other. If I never meet them and they never meet me, they're going to make a perception of me or give their opinion of me without ever talking to me. So I think that's the divide with as far as the legal standpoint. We just need to have more sit downs around tables so they can just understand, like, okay, this is what this industry is. This is why this industry is so loved, and this is the benefits to it. And then we on the side of the industry have to realize and recognize there are bad things to the industry as well. So what we have to do is safeguard those things and be able to protect the American people from things that could go negative. So I think it's just a dialogue that needs to happen on both sides.
Yeah, I think a lot of work to be done, of course, obviously, but I think really interesting on the other side of this experience, which I think can be harrowing for some people, but again, you've maintained a really strong, force forward that you're kind of taking on, you're staying in the world of cannabis. You're pushing to make things better ultimately. I think some people might come out the other side and say, I have an entrepreneurial kind of spirit and I want to apply it in other areas. And
Right.
cannabis has kind of been really tough, for these personal reasons. So I'm going to kind of leave it, work on my own thing and kind of push through that way. But I think to be able to kind of spend the time to make that education, make that understanding, make that connection, can make a difference. And it does feel like we are hopefully on the precipice of, again, moving away from prohibition in a more meaningful way. Still work to be done, of course. And I think, like you're saying, kind of dialogue connection between different areas of the cannabis industry is a net positive, making sure it's kind of shaped in the right way as we go along ultimately. Yeah, really interesting, I think, stuff. Did you ever
Yeah.
consider not going into cannabis on the other side? Were you sort of ever, did you ever kind of question that before jumping in, or were you, whole stock and barrel, you knew that was something that you wanted to kind of get back into?
Well, actually, there's other endeavors and sectors that I'm very, very interested in, and I'm working in as well. So I'm going to go into the commodity sectors as well, as far as with the junior mining sector. I'm very connected with the junior mining sector. I met a lot of people inside who are very, very endowed in the junior mining sector, a lot of Canadian businessmen. So I have a lot of connections over different countries, Africa, Pakistan, Venezuela. So the mining sector is really where my mind is and where I'm putting my foot forward in. It's just that my heart is with the cannabis industry, and I just can't turn my back on them. And I think that I owe it to the industry, and I owe it to those who have fell and are behind the bars that I came from, or those who have been there where I've been. So I think that um, one hand washes the other in the cannabis industry, right? So for all the successful MSOs out there, for all the CEOs who are thriving and are really trying to take their company to the next level, I think that we're all in the same barrel together in the same bucket, and we owe it to each other to help one another. So I can't just turn my back on the industry and say, I'm only going to be in the commodity sector. So I think that the best way to push the market forward and, push through policy and banking and things that needs to change, you have to get hands on. And I can't just turn my back to the industry or to these companies who are the pioneers of the industry. Like, I take my hat off, and I said in other interviews, I'm always going to tip my hat to companies like Trulieve and Verano and Cresco Labs and Glasshouse Farms and things of that nature, because we're the same. Without me, there's no them, and without them, there is no me. As far as this, the people having the same mindset to even go into this industry. So you have to be a cowboy. You have to be an outlaw and say, "Hey, I'm going to go into an industry that's the margins are a little murky, and it's a tough business to be in, but I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to make it happen, and I'm going to push through the mud, and I'm going to come out successful." And I think that we all owe it to each other to sit down and talk to one another and say, hey, how can we better our company first? How can we better the market? And how can we better the American people? And I think that's just where my mind is, and that's where it's always going to be.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Born out of passion and born out of the desire to kind of help others and move things forward. But I think you're right that sort of these leaders in the MSOs in the US and you, I think, share that same ultimately kind of DNA and passion in terms of being willing to be entrepreneurial, which in and itself can be difficult for people, but also to push into a new area, an expanding area
Mm.
where things are a little less certain. I think, very similar, speaking the same language is kind of important as well. But yeah, excited to see kind of what the next chapter for cannabis brings. Your kind of discussions on trying to push this forward bring to mind, of course, another advocate that you work closely with and have met. Would love to kind of dig into your relationship with Weldon Angelos and Mission Green, how you guys got connected and sort of the shared vision there.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story of that. So, um, we met in 2020 in the early stages of my case, and when he got wind of my case, a fellow guy that I was incarcerated with told me about advocacy groups that help nonviolent cannabis offenders. So I reached out, had my family reach out to him and tell him about my case, and he didn't believe that one. I was who I said I was. He thought that I was some other guy, and he confused my case. And he's kind of like, this, like, I don't exist. He's like, there's no way
Mhm.
there's this guy is in prison and he's never been in trouble and he had this much time for this cannabis charge. So at first, I don't know if he thought I was AI at the time before AI got big, but he didn't understand. And
Yeah.
he kind of like, there's no, like, he thought it was a fake case or something. And then he found out that I truly was in there for that long and I'd never been in trouble. So he was just flabbergasted at the fact that, at 2020, there's still people going to prison like me, and getting sentenced to such long terms. So that's how we initially met. And then we spoke on the phone. I called him for jail phone, and we spoke and said that, hey, I'm going to come on board. I'm going to advocate for you, and I'm going to be there from starting today to the day you get out, and then even forward on from that place. So he's been with me. He's a great friend. He's been with me day one, and we're still here together. And I'm going to be working with Mission Green, and we're going to be doing a lot of advocacy work and helping get expungement, and helping getting people out of prison. Going to be helping people rebuild their life. So I want to implement so harshly right here that it's not about just getting a person out of prison. It's about helping them get on their feet as well. And I need a lot of philanthropists and a lot of brands and companies to understand that, when a person is stripped from their life for a certain amount of time, they have to rebuild their life from the foundational standpoint, and getting a person out of prison is the ultimate goal because they're free. But then they could become imprisoned mentally because they don't have any leg to stand on. So they really need help. And to be just blunt, it's going to take financial help to help them get on their feet. These are grown men and grown women who have nothing and they need everything. So I would just say that when in the advocacy space, let's always keep our minds open to the fact that we're really helping a person rebuild themselves from the ground up, and we have to do more and we have to help more. So I want to really implement that point right there as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's super, super important work, of course. And I think you're right. Across a range of elements, it's important to, at least at the very beginning, I think, to be able to find that
Right.
support. I know people face also a lot of hurdles in terms of, jobs or banking or other things. Housing can be
Right.
very difficult. So I think having advocates that are able to kind of help walk you through that process, super important. And I think once you have sort of that stability, sort of the ground under your feet again, I think
Mhm.
people want to, find ways to contribute to their communities. I think it has big ripple effects that are net positive and is something that is definitely worth investing in. So that's great to hear. In particular, with Weldon and Mission Green, are you what's the specific role or kind of elements that you want to kind of take on in that side of things? Just curious.
So for me, I like to be the on a just ambassador side. Also, I'd like to be the liaison or the bridge between MSOs and the communities that were disbarred by the war on drugs. So I really want to be the person in the forefront that's in these communities where these these people were sentenced for harsh crimes like for cannabis. And I want to be in the boardroom talking to these MSOs and these companies and tell them which direction to go, because I think that I am I have a foot in both worlds, and I think that that's the disconnect and the discord is that a lot of companies aren't from those communities and from those backgrounds and don't look like the people in those communities and backgrounds. So there's a distrust there because some people can feel like for the same product, we went to prison and you guys became rich, and I want to kind of squash that narrative and say, hey, let's not make this a you versus us or a MSO or a big brand versus the little guy, and let's all work together. And how you do that is, like I said before, is you have to have conversations. And they're going to be tough conversations, but once we get through those conversations and we get over the emotional disconnection and we come together and we help one another, that's just how we grow the market. So I think that's the role I want to play with Mission Green and with Weldon.
That's fantastic. And I'm sure, have there been anything that you've sort of started to talk about or think about that really you think will resonate sort of with the industry at large? I think we were talking earlier in the pre-show in terms of consumers wanting to invest in the brands or buy from the brands that they feel aligned
Mhm.
with. What are sort of the things? Is that something that is like a key kind of selling point or key thing that resonates, I think, with brands in terms of working together in partnership?
Yeah, so I've been working on a company myself called 448 Capital Partners.
Mhm.
And so what I'm trying to do is create a fund where it's a one hand washes the other. So I'm trying to change the narrative of if marijuana is sold in these communities, the minority communities, right? And the high amount of marijuana cases come out of the minority community, that tells us what? That statistics tells us what? That marijuana is desired in these areas, right? People are using it, people are buying it. So I think that how we tap into the illicit market, we don't run from, we run to it. And so we need to be in these communities where the cannabis is being sold and where people are buying cannabis. And we need to have these brands and these companies in these communities. If you look at most dispensaries, most people want them to be in very expensive, very nice areas, downtowns, beautiful buildings, and things of that nature. But that's very expensive for the company as well. But also, you're missing a lot of customers that are going to the illicit market because there aren't any nice dispensaries in their areas. So I think that we need to allow those communities to take part in the business by owning the stake in the cannabis that's being sold in their communities. And that's where I want to sit down and come up to ultimately agreement on that with these MSOs and large companies who are selling a lot of cannabis in the United States of America right now.
Yeah, really, really interesting. And I guess just sort of looking forward and ahead as things seemingly are changing in the US in terms of how cannabis is looked at from a federal level, how does that sort of open up the opportunity for advocacy and kind of getting those things accomplished going forward versus call it 3 years ago, something like that?
Right. I think it's moving along, and I think, and I'm urging every Congress member or everyone who's pushing the envelope on the safe banking or the legislation to change, that I want to go to Washington D.C. I want to talk to these panels. I want to talk to the other Congress members. I want them to understand that we need this now, and these companies are struggling, and you're really holding them back for being such a great economical help to the United States of America. And I think that we need to pass legislation now, and we need to start implementing banking. These companies are very successful without banking, and that should show you right there that the American people want this. If businesses are thriving without any banking, any financial institutions help, then that should tell you that they're here to stay. And the cannabis companies are here to stay. Trulieve and Cresco Labs and Gossel's Farms, those companies aren't going anywhere, and they have so much more to grow if legislation could change. And I think the legislation also needs to change on um, giving more benefit to companies who help those who come out of prisons that were disbarred or disadvantaged from cannabis crimes, right? So by giving higher tax cuts to those companies for giving those jobs and creating more jobs for these communities that were disbarred for the war on drugs, I think that the companies need more help, and because the communities need more help. So as long as the companies are helping the communities, I think that the government should give them as much help as they possibly can give, because
Yeah.
that's only going to help us, rebuild and redevelop these communities.
Yeah, definitely agree. I just think in terms of the ripple effects and the positive outcomes just across the board seem so strong. I think you mentioned the economic and the job element being important as well. I feel like we've seen some job reports that have been weak in terms of
Right.
people being able to find jobs in the U.S. and being able to find good, solid employment. And I think if you do look to a place like the cannabis industry, which can have its own kind of U.S. Centric industry and a real hub for an engine, I guess, ultimately for economic development. It feels silly to kind of turn away from that as an opportunity for
Mhm.
employment, for development, for all these things. So yeah, I think hopefully that is seemingly on the precipice of change. I think there's only been kind of a mounting support and use and normalization of cannabis in general. So hopefully that kind of helps allow to push things over the edge into a better spot. And then from there, like you're saying, I know banking is an element that is important, but also be interesting to see if we see kind of further cannabis legislation open things up beyond. Because I know Schedule 3 solves a lot of issues for kind of the industry from the business perspective as well. But I think there can be more room to go. Do you have any thoughts in terms of the scheduling element, in terms of what it solves, what it doesn't solve? Anything kind of on that front from your perspective?
Yeah, Schedule 3 is beautiful, and I want to say thank you to President Trump for leading the charge on that. I just think that we need to go a little further, because there's still going to be people that are incarcerated, even though it's going to be a Schedule 3 drug. So I think that we need to first. I don't know if we should do a mass clemency and getting all those men and women out of prisons for cannabis. But I think that it's going to be even more mentally detrimental to be sitting behind prison walls, and the cannabis is now Schedule 3, and it still doesn't affect your case. So I think that it should be retroactive, and I think that there should be a mass clemency or mass pardon to those who are still behind bars for cannabis.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. I think across the board, important to help everybody. In out of curiosity, in terms of your situation, would that
Mhm.
have any material impact? I know, just would be curious.
Ultimately, I would have to go back to my judge or my prosecutor and see if I can get any relief on that. But I do have a pardon in, and I do have a clemency in with President Trump, so I'm hopeful, and
Nice.
I'm very very optimistic that I can get that. And yeah, so I'm excited. Even though I'm still on home confinement, I'm doing as much as I can. I can't travel that far, but whatever that anyone needs me to do, I'm always going to be a champion for the industry and champion for change and for progression. So yeah.
That's fantastic. I think again, making the most of what you have and really using your time and energy and work ethic to push it into making the world ultimately a better place
Right.
is obviously super important. I'm seeing a comment definitely echoing the fact that nobody should be in jail for marijuana. Yep, that is very true. Hopefully, we are hopefully on the precipice of seeing real change here. But again, it depends, I think, on the advocates, on the dollars that support that advocacy, and kind of pushing things ahead. So hopefully we see that very soon. But again, appreciate the work that you're doing. In
Thank
terms
you.
of where people can kind of stay in touch and tune with you, where would you point people to kind of follow the work you're doing today?
Yeah, so I know I'm not that old yet, but I'm a little. catching up on the social medias. But I'm on Instagram at Bear BEAR Heyman, my last name Haymon. I'm on X at Jerry Heyman, my first name JERRY HAYMON. I'm on TikTok now at Bear Heyman BEARHAYMON. I'm on LinkedIn at Jerry Heyman. And I think that's all my socials so far. So yeah, that's it. I'm trying to keep up, but there's so many now.
I feel like you have stayed in tune. I feel like that's pretty solid in terms of where people are. So I would say you're doing great. Don't worry about it. But yeah, if you're out there and joining, want to follow Jerry and what he's doing and pushing ahead, definitely take a look at all those socials wherever you are. Jerry, thanks for taking the time. Really, really appreciate it. Everybody, thanks for joining. And we will catch you tomorrow. Thanks again. Really
Thank you
appreciate it.
so much. Thank you.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at AdvisorShares.com.